Okay, hi, I'm Lucy Empson and I am the Network Connector who works for Teach First, but I get the pleasure of supporting the most amazing network that we support, which is the Heads Forward Network. And I am joined today by one of our network members, 2006 Ambassador Tom Beveridge. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Not at all, it's a pleasure.
Would you like to introduce yourself properly? So I've introduced you as a 2006 Ambassador, but tell us a bit more about who you are.
Okay, well, yeah, I was going to start with that. So I joined Teach First in 2006 as a history trainee at the Business Academy Bexley, which I believe is now called Harris Garrard Academy in South East London, and never thought I was going to be a teacher. Those annoyingly inspirational people at Teach First came to where I was at University of Nottingham, gave a presentation in my final year at university. I thought I'll give that a go, and here we are, however many years, 17 years later. So yeah, I've stuck at it, and yeah, I stayed at Business Academy Bexley for about 3 years, and then I moved to a school in East London, Seven Kings High School. Joined there as head of history, and I think I was at Seven Kings, I lose track, for about 5 years. I gained an assistant head teacher position while I was still there, and then relocated to Bristol. So found a lovely school in Wiltshire called Malmesbury School, where I joined there as an assistant head teacher. And then fast forward another couple of years, the school was setting up a multi-academy trust, and they took on a school in the Forest of Dean that was placed in special measures. And in all my wisdom, at that point, I applied to be the head teacher there, and joined there in 2016 as head teacher, or head of school actually initially, and then head teacher. And now I'm at a school called Alderbook School in Solihull in the West Midlands, and I've been here for the last 3 years. So there you go. There's a whistle-stop tour of the last 17 years or so.
Oh, that's amazing. And isn't that so funny? Like when you were sitting there at university, this is probably the last place you thought you'd be sitting, leading your second school as head teacher. Your journey through senior leadership has been like a really interesting one, Tom, hasn't it? Like, because we met at that kind of crossroads of, are you going to apply for the headship, or are you going to stay in your assistant headship position? So what was it that made you go for the headship?
That's a really good question. Well, I guess the first, oh gosh, probably not. Yeah, maybe even sort of 7, 8 years of my career, I kind of felt like I was on a bit of a, and I'm always intrigued when I speak to other people who've been through Teach First, if they felt the same as I did. I kind of felt I was on a bit of a like a conveyor belt. You're sort of surrounded by other ambitious people, and you jump at opportunities, and like without, and I don't mean, to sort of belittle the hard work that it took, but without realizing it, I was suddenly an assistant head, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a responsible position. And then with family, moved across to Bristol, and ended up in another second assistant head position. And that's when we had a meeting, didn't we? In about, I think it was probably late 2015.
Yeah.
And I think our sort of first opening gambit was a head teacher position come up, and I'm only assistant head teacher, but what do you think, Lucy? And half an hour later, I was getting an application for a head teacher position. And I think, I remember speaking at the time to other fellow 2006 trainees, and I hope they don't mind me name dropping, but especially the fact that the event in July is going to be at his school. But I sat on a panel with Chris from Totteridge and with May, both 2006 cohort Teach First. And I remember distinctly them saying, yeah, I sort of, well, Chris especially, he'd really planned his career to that point, and planned, my sort of journey wasn't quite like that. I'd never thought that I was going to end up where I did. And therefore been sort of coming to terms with that ever since. But yeah, I'd never sort of planned my career path. It all kind of happened. And it was only when I was speaking to you, and in that period when I was considering a headship, did I kind of jump off that conveyor belt and go, well, no, hang on a sec, I can do this here, and why shouldn't I have a go at it? And so yeah, it sort of changed at that point for me, I reckon.
Yeah, and like that's really interesting what you say. It's like taking that step back, because I think that there's lots of like incredible assistant head teachers out there that it's almost like that perfectionist thing, like they feel like they've got to have everything perfect at assistant head level. But actually, when these opportunities arise, actually jumping and seeing it how you do with the right support around you can actually be the thing that kind of just pushes you on to the next level and kind of suits you up. And so what was it that, like you said, that you were sitting there at university and you have this presentation and it's like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm going to give that a go. What was it that stood out to you most of like why you wanted to join Teach First? Was it working with disadvantaged communities? Like, what was it that stood out?
Yeah, and I think probably it was sort of the joint thing. I enjoyed studying history at university and thought, well, you know, I don't know where else to take it. That old cliche of becoming a teacher, but why not? But also, I think the mission at that point, you know, and how it was put across to me of addressing, you know, educational disadvantage, that to me was really interesting, you know, having grown up not in a disadvantaged household or family, the thought of working in that community and having a genuine impact was quite inspiring to me, and I think that's how it was sold, and that's how it came across, and I guess you don't sort of go into teaching day to day thinking, right, I'm going to change the world today, but you do have that genuine chance every single day to work with wonderful people, wonderful young people, and to make a real difference. And that's what's so brilliant about this job, and so brilliant about teaching generally, that every day is so different. Every day you get to work with hilarious young people who make you laugh and cry all at the same time, and yeah, and the chance to genuinely affect change in these communities, I think, is a really inspiring opportunity to earn a living by as well.
Absolutely. And so what does that impact look like at like head level? Because obviously you've worked in, do you want to just explain a bit about the different contexts of the schools that you've been head teacher in and what that kind of impact looks like?
Yeah, so I guess if I jump back to 2015, 2016, I was working in Malmesbury, a comprehensive school in Wiltshire, but quite an affluent part of Wiltshire, really brilliant school, you know, and catering for a really diverse cohort. But when the trust, it's called the Atherstone Trust, took on a school called the Dean Academy in the Forest of Dean, it really became apparent to me that and it was one of those classic tales you hear of the school as basically being special measures for the, you know, the previous 10 years. And it kind of really struck me at that point that no one was really fighting. Well, it didn't feel like publicly, of course, there was staff in that school really fighting the students' corner, but no one was publicly really fighting and giving those students a voice. And sort of fighting for them. And I felt this guilt at that point, and we had that conversation around the fact that I hadn't really, having done the 2-year program, I hadn't really engaged with the ambassador community that much, and that guilt of sort of stepping away from Teach First. But again, I refound that fire of going, well, hang on a second. Yes, I'm in an assistant head position in a really good school, and I'm loving what I'm doing, but maybe there's an opportunity to do something a bit different here. So the chance to go and work in a very deprived rural community is why I applied for the job in the Forest of Dean. So, you know, for those people listening to this who work in a rural context in a school, the challenges are very different, of course, to an urban context, but and a lot of the deprivation in those communities is really hidden. But I found it an absolutely fascinating context to work in it, and to think about how we could address some of the challenges that disadvantaged young people in rural communities face. So that's what inspired me to first work, you know, or re-engage, I guess, in a very disadvantaged community in the Forest of Dean.
And then what's your school context like now? What's your school like that you're working in?
So we're a single academy trust. We're a large co-educational secondary comprehensive school, 1,600 students, serving, again, a very mixed community in South Solihull. And so, you know, there's a lot of affluence in the area, but a lot of challenges as well. And I was talking to you recently about the fact that actually now what we're all facing with is a sort of new post-COVID world, where some of those challenges that I was dealing with in the rural Forest of Dean area, we're dealing with in a very different way now, but oh my gosh, are they prevalent? And we're having to really think about how we engage our communities, and how we bring a sort of cohesive education to our young people. And there seems to be in the last few years a loss of faith in institutions related to the government, a lack of community cohesion in all sorts of different communities, and we're certainly feeling that here. And as a single academy trust, having come from being a head in a multi-academy trust, it's been a really interesting transition for me, in terms of how I work with other colleagues, other leaders locally. So that's been quite different.
Yeah, amazing. And Tom, you mentioned there about like, you know, stepping away from Teach First and like feeling that guilt. When we first met, you actually said, I need to apologize, I've been a really bad ambassador. And it's something that I'm totally trying to bust the myth of, this like notion there are bad ambassadors because you're, you know, maybe not as tapped into the community as you were when you were on the program. So how have you since we connected, like how have you engaged with the community and kind of use your networks and of peers to kind of support you on your leadership journey?
Well, I mean, I'll be brutally honest. I don't think I would still be a head teacher if I hadn't had a network of other head teachers that I could relate to and be honest with, through Teach First. If so, from the moment that we had met, and I think you were a local engagement officer at the time in a role in terms of connecting me with other ambassadors who were either had made that jump to headship or were in senior leadership. And I think from the outset there, you linked me up with someone who was a head in Swindon at the time, and I went to visit them and talk through what that would feel like, going for the interview and then going through that process. And then I forget the year that the Heads Forward network was set up, but being a part of that network, I think it was in 2016, wasn't it? Or close to
I think it was.
From the outset, that's been hugely beneficial, just to be, you know, in a community of very like-minded people, of very inspirational people who've gone on, and I've always felt this massive sense of imposter syndrome, I still do, in terms of working with, and you know, other Teach First ambassadors who have, you know, accomplished incredible things in their communities and in the roles they've gone on to. But what I'd say about the Heads Forward network that we have, and there's well over 100 members of that network now, is a chance, and all people in senior leadership need this, but a chance to be really brutally honest about what we're all going through, a chance to offload, and a chance to work very closely. And I still work really, really closely with that network. One of our ambassador community is my sort of leadership coach, and he comes in and works with myself and you know, my whole leadership team in terms of coaching. So on many levels, I've benefited from that, and I think our school has benefited from that as well.
Yeah, amazing. It really is such a unique and honest network to be a part of, and obviously we're going to be incredibly biased, but if there are any ambassadors that are about to step into headship, like, this really is like a call for you to make contact with us, because we can basically get you in the fold of over 125 incredible current and former head teachers that have got a wealth of knowledge and experience that are kind of there to lift everyone up around them, and it's support and challenge, and it's like you said, brutal honesty. It's such a great network to be part of. So Tom, what are you most proud of in your career to date?
Oh, I would probably say, as a group of staff working in the Dean Academy in the Forest of Dean in Lydney, where, as I said, when I joined the school in 2016, the school was in special measures, and I think what was really tough for colleagues is you know, a number of colleagues been working in that school for a number of years, and you go into work every day, you work really hard, but the school was still in special measures. So we were able to work with colleagues there and work together. And 2 years later, the school came out of special measures. And so that probably personally is the proudest moment in my career in terms of working with that community, but also for that community. It was such a big deal at the time, and such a big deal for the staff who have worked in that school for such a long time. And what's lovely is when I left the school in 2020, another ambassador head, Richard Brand, took on the headship, and the school and Richard and the team there have continued to do an amazing job, and the school has now been judged as good by Ofsted, and for that community and for the young people, their outcomes continue to improve. And I think, you know, the legacy of what we have achieved and the staff there continue to achieve for the young people is really great.
It's amazing. That's brilliant. And obviously Teach First is turning 20 years this year, Tom. So I just wanted to ask the question, what does Teach First, like 20 years of Teach First, mean to you?
And I guess I'll answer that in two parts. Personally, you know, I'm really sort of grateful that I was given the opportunity at the start, and that you know, without that organisation being set up, the opportunity to work in the communities that I've had the opportunity to work in, probably I would have never recognised that was there for me. I've spoken a little bit about the communities that I've worked in, but I'm absolutely passionate about ensuring that schools can act as an anchor within their community, and especially in disadvantaged communities, that is so necessary to ensure that our young people have a really coherent education from birth right the way through to 18 and beyond. And I guess for me, therefore, Teach First, going back to that fundamental mission of addressing educational disadvantage, what it means to me over the last 20 years is Teach First has had to consistently adapt to the challenges that have been thrown at Teach First and have been thrown at our young people. And I think what COVID has shown me is that we're going to have to continue to adapt to support these communities, and we're never going to be done with this work to address the educational disadvantage. But Teach First has adapted, I feel, really well to the challenges that these communities face, and will need to continue to adapt in the future, and on so many levels, whether, you know, ambassadors are still working in education or not. There is so much still to be done, so much just by being a part of the Teach First network and the ambassador community. So much can still be done to continue to bang the drum for these young people that we're serving year in, year out.
Thank you so much, Tom. Tom, is there anything that we haven't covered from your story that you wanted to share, or any kind of messages you'd like other ambassadors to kind of really take away from this conversation?
Probably just that I've come to the realization since going, and now in my second head teacher post, that and I mentioned imposter syndrome before, that I don't think anyone will ever feel ready to take the next step, whether it's going into headship or not. And I've kind of come to terms with my imposter syndrome, and that it's still very much there. And I still don't really feel like I have a clue what I'm doing day to day. But then you kind of start to realize that no one else has a clue either, and that's okay. But as long as you can connect with people, and as long as you can, you know, keep your values at the heart of everything that you do, I think headship is an absolutely wonderful role to have, and I find it immensely rewarding to work with incredible colleagues in my current school and my last schools that I've worked at, and to be able to connect with people. And I think headship gets a really bad press sometimes quite rightly. It is a really high pressure job, but at the same time it's immensely rewarding. So I'm always of the view that you know, if that bit of curiosity is there in people's minds around making the next step in their career, then give it a go, because none of us have a clue, but it's okay.
The brilliant thing about imposter syndrome is it has that knack of meaning you can't see all the evidence around you that is counter to what you're thinking. So as much as you're saying you don't have a clue about it, you're in your second headship. You've had like made huge impacts, like positive impacts in the school that you've led. So yeah, and it's just the imposter syndrome thing is like fascinating because it's present in everyone at any level of role that they're doing. It's kind of rife, which is, you know, it's a horrible thing, but also I think just calling it out and saying it how it is really hugely powerful, because people think they're the only person that are viewing their own performance in that way. But always look for the evidence to counter it, because it's there all around you. Thank you so much for your time today, Tom. And we're really sad you're not going to be at the event on the 1st of July in person, but for very good reasons. But if anybody wants to connect with you, what I'm going to do is put the Heads Forward email address and also a link to our website in the description below. So if anybody's watching this and they want to pick up a conversation with Tom, just get in touch. Thanks for listening.